What's going on, world? Coming at you guys again. We got another quick video. Michigan Senate. Let's talk about it. So currently, there's a running that's happening in Michigan for the seat of senator, and it looks like right now it's between two individuals or two interested parties or two interested candidates. One of them being Abdul El Sayed and Mike Rogers. Now, a little bit of background on Abdul El Sayed: bachelor's, doctorate. I'm not aware that he's an actual doctor. To my understanding, I'm not aware of him facilitating any type of actual hands-on experience when it comes to treating patients, but I guess he's a doctor nonetheless. Maybe he's held a couple positions in management of some sort. And I know I read something about him forgiving up to $700 million worth of medical debt for, I guess, maybe impoverished or local communities. And, he's probably sat on a couple boards based off of medical interventions of some sort, right? With Narcan being available for individuals whom were overdosing from opioids, things of that nature based off of his level for wherever he was at as the Wayne County Health Commissioner or something like that, which is completely different than being in the Senate, right? Like all of these accomplishments in which he did within that position are not to be taken in a negative fashion. They're to be acknowledged and recognized. But the reality of the situation is, these ideas and ideals in which he's trying to foster and facilitate as a senator, well, unfortunately, I don't believe they'll have any traction. You know, as it stands right now, we don't know what his political ties are. We don't know what his resources are. We don't know what his support system looks like. So, while he has these ideas to some individuals that are standing out that, they are accepting for and they're interested in, there's no definitive pathway for him to actually facilitate and, actually create these ideas in which he is trying to facilitate or pursue, right? It's, as it looks like right now, it's a lot of smoke with no fire. And then when you look at Mike Rogers, well, Mike Rogers is an individual who has a historical background here in America, primarily within the military. To my understanding, his father was an Air Force veteran, and he decided to go in the Army, which is a very interesting perspective because everybody knows that the Air Force has it the easiest. So for this guy to go join the Army when clearly he could have, joined the Air Force is a clear indication of an individual who, is not afraid to, step up to the plate. It shows a lot of heart, it shows a lot of courage, it shows a lot of determination, and it shows a lot of grit, right? Instead of taking an easy way out, he got his degree and, became an officer in the United States Army. So, kudos to him. To my understanding, I believe his son or grandson is also in the Army currently, or is about to go in, or has already served, or something like that. So there's a family history of tradition for supporting our country, as well as all Americans, because without Americans fighting and serving in the military, unfortunately, we don't really know where we would be because, without our military, we wouldn't have the security that's required in order to facilitate such a diverse country for so many different people. Now, outside of that, Mike Rogers also served in the FBI, where he was going after other individuals whom were representatives of a political nature that were involved with corruption, kind of what we're seeing right now when it comes to like Nick Shirley and all this fraud that's happening all across the nation. And, it's very in correlation to what's been going on with the Department of Economic or Department of Government Efficiency, which is, been looking at different spectrums and issues to where people have unfortunately utilized federal funds for inappropriate purposes. And, that's kind of where we're going right now, was trying to lower the debt. And, he already has a background in that. So, Mike Rogers, when you look at it, he's been around for a while. And, for the trajectory that we are on currently, he's got a lot of experience. He's got a lot of support in which can already be instituted and replicated. He's got a lot to bring to the table. I'm not diminishing or demoralizing El Sayed, but the application in which we are trying to foster and facilitate here in this country, specifically in the state of Michigan, if the wheel is going to continue to move forward, it doesn't make sense to throw a chink in it, right? Because the wheel of success and progression needs to be smooth. It doesn't need to be held up with unnecessary constraints. And, again, I'm not knocking El Sayed, but from his points and plans, it doesn't really go in line, and it's not in line with the current trajectory and path in which we're currently on. We've done a lot of successful things here in our country under Trump so far, and we still got some more time with Trump, so we need to make sure that we're facilitating this as best as possible. And from my understanding, Mike Rogers is also interested in facilitating manufacturing and reinvigorating manufacturing, as Michigan used to be a major placeholder for manufacturing, like union workers and auto. And it would make sense because we look at like Amazon, and that's another form of manufacturing as well. So we can be looking at from a historical approach to manufacturing to modern times manufacturing, which is jobs for so many people. It's very interesting because El Sayed talks about affordability, but the reality of the situation is Michigan is unaffordable because of the application in which they are trying to promote it as a tourist city. When you go look at every other tourist city across the country, they're all also unaffordable. I lived in Honolulu for a while, and that's just the nature of the beast. And this is the plan that Democrats wanted to implement in order to try to stimulate the economy in Michigan. And unfortunately, it's had a terrible outcome for the gentrification as well as the continued oppression of Michiganders. And, outside of this pointing out the obvious, by El Sayed, Mike Rogers is actually trying to implement different strategies to empower and to grow the economical constraints outside of, scraping by to having more money in your pocket. And that's through automation. That's through, as we talked about, is manufacturing, and, there's other factors. Again, when we talk about gas, right? Gas being as high as it is. Well, we're in Iran right now, and we already went into Venezuela. So what could be possible is, as Mike Rogers has already talked about with this manufacturing, is it could be possible to facilitate some form of a transition point for this Venezuelan oil to be refined and utilized in order to facilitate cheaper gas or more access to gas. And we could have, a company could open up in Michigan, through Senate and through the president, to where we offer opportunities for Michiganders to go, work on these refineries that we could be based in Michigan, and with the proper technology, it's not a major polluter. And, as we continuously move forward, this individual, Mike Rogers, is also, well within the constraints of his age. And we talk about affordability, we talk about Social Security, we talk about Medicare. When we talk about Social Security and we talk about Medicare, he has a vested interest in making sure that it is safe and secure for other individuals because he's of the same age. So, when we really look at how all this plays out, to go out and vote for an individual whom means well, but again, we don't really know the support system that he has or resources that he has in order to facilitate these ideas, it could just be all smoke with good intentions, which is a great thing, but it does nothing for the people that are actually, depending on him. And as I said before, him being in an ascendant position and all of his accolades and accomplishments that he did in the appointed position that he was in, he's not going to be able to facilitate those, at least not to my belief, because that's not how the Senate works. An individual in the Senate takes the information of his constituents and he passes it up, and then his superiors and his compatriots, his pals, as it were, they all come together and they make an executive decision. And Trump is, the one at the top who's going to say, yeah, let's make it happen. With El Sayed is, it's like taking a coin and putting it into a wishing well. If you guys had the opportunity, man, go check out Mike Rogers, his profile page, and it'll give you a list of all the things that he's accomplished and everything he's been involved in, to include the safety and security of children. He's led a task force and implemented investigative tools to help combat and counter, to make sure that children are safe and, they're not being unnecessarily harmed or involved in child trafficking and pedophilia, et cetera, et cetera. So, Mike Rogers is all over the place, man. Small businesses to help create and facilitate more income and easier income for them, right? And so whether it's a small business or a regular Michigander that's trying to find some type of income, this guy's there, when you look at El Sayed, again, I'm not knocking the guy because I don't know him, but his plan of action, his history, it doesn't seem like now is the right time for him to be in office. Maybe in the next 2 years or 4 years, maybe the guy has something and, maybe he can move forward. But, again, we're trying to move forward as a nation. We're trying to move forward to make America safe and secure for all Americans, regardless of race, color, creed, culture, and religion, And, when you guys are talking about AIPAC, right? AIPAC is a political organization that has nothing to do with this, right? I'm Jewish, as I've said before. I'm also white. I'm also black, right? You can, post the DNA results if you want to, and I'm also a foundational Black American, Native American, Indigenous American, whatever you want to call it, right? But when you guys talk about AIPAC, it's clearly a political organization. Clearly has Jewish members, and they also have ties to Israel to some degree, right? But that's not to say that they're anti-America. A quick history lesson is the individuals that support AIPAC and members of AIPAC were the individuals that were there for America after the Great Depression in the 30s. We have had members here in America that are primarily responsible for maintaining the safety and security of this nation through hard times. And it's been here since the beginning. We've had Jewish people come here since the beginning and help establish and initiate the founding of America, fought in our wars, help facilitate the amenities in which you grew up on and your children are utilizing. I understand not everybody agrees with what's going on in Israel and the actions in which took place in Israel and are still taking place in Israel and Iran and, the rest of the Middle East is, it's unfortunate, but it is a path towards success. Again, I'll say this out loud. America is the most diverse country on the planet. We are open to any and every person who wants to practice the teachings as well as the methodology that is ingrained within the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. When you go look at all the rest of these countries all around the world, nobody is practicing what America is doing. And America is supported by AIPAC, supported by Jewish people, supported by Black, white, Hispanic, Polynesian, Asian, like we represent every single person. And so when you go look at all the rest of these nations that Israel may be involved with and America may be involved with, these individuals aren't reaching out to people around the world saying that, hey, if you are oppressed or suppressed, or if you're in a situation to where you are destitute, we are opening up our borders to allow you to come here to be free of the country in which you feel as though that you're oppressed in. They're not. They're only interested in safing and securing themselves. And this is the biggest downfall. And I hate to put this out there because this is classified information to the non-intelligent. The reality of the situation is all the rest of these nations that are all around the world, if they truly had a vested interest in people as a whole, these nations would be sending out information through social media, through some form of technological innovation to let you know that, hey, if you live in this country, doesn't have to be in America, but if you live in a country in which you feel suppressed and oppressed, our border is open for you. These are our requirements. We will facilitate and house you, etc., etc. And nobody does that. When you go look at these foreign nations, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, Palestine, China, when you go look at all these foreign nations, they're 95% that specific race. America is the only country that's fighting for diversity for all people. And it's through the help of AIPAC, and it's through the help of Jewish people as a whole, as well as every other type of person on the planet, regardless of race, color, creed, culture, religion. If it wasn't that case, then people like El Sayed wouldn't even be able to run for Senate because he would be getting shunned through the polls. He would be getting harassed when he stepped out onto the street. Dearborn is primarily and predominantly Muslim, and it's been like that for a long time. So the reality of the situation is America accepts all people regardless. But when you go look at Muslim countries, again, they're 95% that particular Muslim, right? You don't see a lot of black people or, who are also Muslim over there. And that's just the unfortunate reality. So as it stands right now, the wheel is rolling. And the choice to be made is to send out a vote. And you can vote for Mike Rogers or you can vote for El Sayed. One of those votes, unfortunately, is going to put a block in the way of the wheel, while the other one is going to make sure that the path moving forward is as smooth and fast as possible.